Good afternoon. So I want to talk to you about worshiping foreign gods. Now, one thing that I have personally always found very offensive is this concept of worshiping foreign gods. I've always hated this idea. I've always hated this idea of worshiping foreign gods. And it's not because I hate other people's religions, it's because it's their religion and it's not my religion. And so this idea that I need to worship someone else's God is extremely offensive to me. And it's always been offensive to me. And the first time I was offended by it was when I was told that the Israelites had the real God and I was to worship their God. Now, of course, I grew up, in an area where, this is like we considered ourselves extensions of the European race, right? Because I grew up in a time during the 70s and 80s where it's like we're basically European people, and here we live in the Americas, and we're not the Israelites really. We kind of thought of those who were like a different people, but we're Christians over here, and we celebrate Christmas and we celebrate Easter. But somehow it's all tied into this God that was from Jerusalem. And so that was always a little bit offensive to me. And I wasn't aware, really, that the Bible had strict restrictions on worshiping other gods, which is also very interesting. Now, why did the Bible have restrictions on worshiping other gods? Is also an interesting question that I didn't really even understand until I started doing some serious research into completely duplicating and understanding why the Bible was written, who wrote it, why they wrote it, and who they were really. And I started that, it must have been about 3 years ago, where I really dove into really duplicate exactly who these people were and exactly what they were thinking at the time. And the explanation for that is that they were in Egypt, and there were actual people in Egypt that were from the territory that we today called Syria, or northern Iraq, which at the time was called Aram. And so there was a race of people that came down from Aram, and this is how it's described in the Bible too. They came down from this territory in Aram, and they came down and they lived among the Canaanites. And then they went down into Egypt, and while they were in Egypt, they became close to Egyptian power, but they were never considered Egyptians, and they were kind of in like a contentious. This is according to Egyptian history. This is the case that there was a contention between this race of people and the Egyptian courts that they were part of. They had actually become part of the Egyptian administration of government, but they were not racial Egyptians, and so there was some kind of contention there. Now, racial Egyptians weren't the black Africans, although there were black Africans in Egypt, and they did have political power at certain time before the New Kingdom. But I'm talking about the New Kingdom period, which is the time where Amos restored the Egyptian empire of the southern area, which is where the black Africans are, the northern area, which is where the Hyksos were, all throughout Canaan, all the way up to near Syria, and where today is called Turkey. At the time, it was the Hittite kingdom. So the Hittite kingdom, and I will say about the Hittite kingdom, is that they spoke an Indo-European language, which is basically the same as Latin and words that are in Latin and words that are in German. Although the Germans and the Latin, some words came in from Latin into Germany, or maybe it came directly from the Hittite Empire into the German-speaking people. However that happened, I don't know. Because the word lukta means light in ancient Hittite. And of course, it's luz in Latin, and it's licht in Germany, and it's light in English. So that comes from the Hittite kingdom. So that's an Indo-European speaking language. Now the Greek word for light was phos. Phos. That's where we get phosphorus. That's where we get photon. And the Aramaic word for light is Ar. And this is where you get the words Era, which is a moon phase, and Era, Ara, light of the moon. It's also in what you call Hebrew or Yehudit would be Yarach. So Yarach or Era, very similar. The Aryans were Aryans. That's A-R. That's somewhere that means light. Whatever else it means. Now, the other word would be Uruk or Ur, because Ur is the city of light, which is where Abraham was from, the city of light. So the city of Ur, or the temple of Ur, would be the temple of light. Uruk could be light of the moon also. Like you have Arach, but if you put a ach on the end of it, it's Arach, Iraq, Uruk, Eric. So you got Eric, Uruk, Iraq, Ara, Jericho. All those words that I just said there mean moonlight or a month, because the moon was a central object of the calendar. That's how you determined the time. I mean, the moon is basically a clock, and that's what gave the moon such importance in religions, or timing when would you do your festivals, when would you do this, when would you do that. You'd use the moon with the sun. So it's a lunisolar calendar. You've got the sun in certain positions at certain times of the year. Obviously the winter solstice is a big one. Now there weren't let's not talk about the winter solstice. There were some traditions with the winter solstice in the Middle East, and then in some areas there weren't. But like spring is a big one. You'd have the spring equinox, and then you'd have the full moon after the spring equinox, and that's when Passover is. So anyway, Iraq, Uruk, Eric, Jericho, Yarach, Era. Those are all what you would call Aramaean, and also Hebrew, in the form of Yar or Jerusalem or Jericho. So it's R or Yar. And so you've got, the Hebrew language, you've got the Amorite or Akkadian language also included that term R. And then in Samaria, that area over there, Syria. So then these other people also came down from the north with an Indo-European language, and these people were the Mitanni and the Hittites and the some other people that came down from the north. The Hurrians. Okay, Hurrian. The Hurrian could be Haran, could be similar. Haran, Iran, Aryan. So there's a mix of people there. They're using some words that are coming from the Aramaic or Akkadian or Sumerian. And there's words coming from the Indo-European languages. They're kind of mixing them up. So anyway, beyond that, so the story is, you get these people that came down from Aram, and they traveled down into Canaan. Then they went down into Egypt. And while they were in Egypt, they were not considered Egyptians. Now, there was, so here's the thing. We have the story of Abraham, who came from Ur. He was Aramaic. He was an Aramaic person or race, right? And he was part of this thing which said that, all these gods are really not gods, and that there is a spiritual dimension to the universe which is separate, and that this was kind of his thing, you know what I mean? He didn't make a religion out of it, though. That was just an observation he had made. It was more like a scientific observation, I would say. He didn't make it into a religion. Who did make it into a religion, though, was the Israelites. They took that concept and made it into a religion with Moses and the Israelites and Aaron and the establishment of Israel. So it was made into a religion by these people. And it seems to be seems possible that this religion also is spoken of, or this ideology is spoken of, in Zoroastrianism. And Zoroaster seems to be a Persian or Aryan or Iranian name for the exact same person in history that we know of as Abraham. Now, the only person that really spoke of this other than Josephus that we know of, was a guy named Berosus, who was a priest of. He was a Chaldean priest of Baal. No, Bel, something or another. I'm sorry, I can't remember right now. Anyway, he wrote. He translated the ancient Chaldean writings into Greek for a Greek audience. Berosus did. I think he was a high priest of Bel Marduk or something like that. But he was translating the old books. The flood myth, he translated that from Chaldean into Greek for the Greeks before it was translated. Was it before they translated it into the Bible for Ptolemy? I'm not sure. But he was translating the books of the Chaldeans into Greek, and so he translated the flood myth into Greek, and it was the story of a fellow named Ziusudra, which in the original story was called the original was Ziusudra, and Berosus translated it as Xisutherus. So Xisutherus is a Greek name for Ziusudra, who was the original flood myth character who survives the flood, which the flood is brought on by the Anunnaki gods that want to destroy man because man is annoying. Now notice that it's different in the Israelite version. It's about righteousness versus wickedness. So the Israelites changed it to be a story of the man was flooded because they were wicked. Noah was saved because he was righteous. In the original version, man is destroyed because man is annoying. And they're just annoying, and the only reason men were saved at all was because Enki didn't want his creation destroyed, so he went down and gave man the secret info that, hey, they're planning to kill you, you better build a boat. And so Ziusudra, or Xisutherus also, built the boat and saved as many people as he could. It wasn't because he was righteous. It was because that was Enki's creation, and Enki didn't want his creation destroyed. But the other gods did want it destroyed because they found it to be highly annoying. So in the Bible, we have a new teaching. The teaching of the Bible is do righteous and live, be wicked and get destroyed. And so that's a different teaching, and that's why the Bible is what it is, and that's why the pagan religion and stories are what they are. They're different. So, but when we look at the gods, okay, I spent some time arguing with Muslims. And Islam, in my opinion, is a religion that was copied from the Bible by Arabs. And then they made a whole religion out of it using the Israelite prophets, who now they claim are Muslim prophets. I think that's not true. I do not think the Muslim prophets are Israelite prophets and vice versa. If you read the stories of the Israelites, it's a story specifically for the Israelites and their people. And all the prophecies of Israel are for their people. Why? Because they came out of Egypt and they were not Egyptian. And they wanted their own religion. Why? Because they were being persecuted. They didn't want... See, they were rejecting Egypt because they were in a social relationship with the Egyptians. And the Egyptians were like, we're going to kill you. We don't want you around anymore. And so they said, fine, we're going to have our own gods. We're not going to worship your gods. Because the Egyptian gods were worshipped all throughout Egypt and North Africa and up into Canaan and into the Sinai and all over the place, right? Because the Egyptians controlled all that territory. And they said, fine, you don't like us? We're going to start our own religion. And they did. And that's why it's not the religion of any other race. That's why it's not the religion of the Arabs, and it's not the religion of the Greeks, and it's not the religion of the Romans, and it's not the religion of the Egyptians, and it's not even the religion of the Aramaeans, who they came from, and it's not the religion of the Canaanites who then adopted it. It's literally only the religion of those people that were in Egypt that said, this is ours, and we don't want to be part of anyone else's because you don't like us anyway. And that's why Moses is called Moses. Now, the Hebrew, the Jewish scholars, the rabbis, they don't know what Moses means. They have a false meaning for it. Moses just means born of. That's what it's a pharaonic title. It's a title of the Egyptian kings. And in Egypt, they would say born of Ah, which is the moon. Born of Ra, which is the sun. Born of whoever. Born of Thoth, Thothmosis, Ramosis, Ahmosis, born of Thoth, born of Ra, born of Ah. So they're born of these gods. So it shows that they come from the gods, right? And Moses, there's no God before it. There's no Egyptian God. It's just Moses, born of myself. I've rejected you. It's a way of saying I've rejected you. I've rejected your gods. So now in the Bible, there's all these passages about do not worship foreign gods. Do not worship foreign gods. Do not worship foreign gods. Don't worship foreign gods. Reject foreign gods. I'll read you a couple of them. Psalm 81:9. You shall have no foreign god among you, and you shall not worship any god other than me. Never be guilty of worshiping any other god but me. Do not follow other gods. Deuteronomy 6:14. Exodus 23-5. You must not worship any other gods. So no strange gods, no foreign gods. Right. Why is that? Because it was a religion for them with their God and no other gods. This is why they were so against worshiping other gods. Because they had gone through this experience in Egypt, and they were not going to have other gods anymore. They were starting their own thing. Now, so here's this thing, right? You start talking to Muslims, and they start going off about how Allah is the God of everybody. He's the God of everybody. And this is kind of what the Catholics did too, right? Didn't the Catholics do the same thing? That that Jesus is the God of everybody. He's the God of everybody. Well, it doesn't say that in the Bible. Jesus is in the Bible story. He came only for the lost sheep of Israel, and it was about an argument between the Israelites. And he didn't come for anybody else. He just came to speak to the Israelites and tell them that they were. It was a big argument. I don't want to get into that argument again. I made other videos about what that argument was about. But it wasn't about coming to turn everybody into one religion. That's not what it was about. Now, so when I'm arguing with the Muslims, for instance, and they're saying, but Allah is the God of everybody. Okay, well, so was Yepta. You see, let me explain something to you. In Egyptian religion, the god Ta, or as I believe it may have pronounced, and I don't know why I believe this, but I think it could have been pronounced Yepta. But it's written as Ta, so most people say Ta, P-T-A-H, Ta. I think it's probably Yepta. Was the creator god. He created the world out of nothing. So did Atum. Atum creates the world out of nothing. So let's take Atum, since we're all familiar with Atum. Atom. That's where we get the word atom in Greek science, right? The world's made of atoms. Well, Atum is the creator, and he's the creator of everyone. He created everyone. He's the creator God. He's the one God that created all the other gods in the universe. So isn't that the same as Allah? So why don't you, if you're a Muslim, why don't you start worshiping Atum? Why don't you do that? Because it's a foreign god. And you're like, but he's not Allah. You see how that works? Well, that's not Allah. Well, I know. His name's Atum in Egyptian. But I'm not Egyptian. Okay, well, I'm not an Arab. I'm not an Arab. You're not an Egyptian. And the Israelites weren't Egyptians. And so they started their own religion with their own God that was like them. And this gets to the thing of like, well, I guess you're saying that it's all that's the gods are that's fake. The gods are fake. What I'm saying is that every race of people mythologizes their god in a certain way. And so it was totally unnecessary for the Arabs to copy the Israelite God and say that all the prophets of Israel were actually prophets of Islam. It was unnecessary. Why'd you do that? You didn't need to. You could have just... You see, the Israelites did that for themselves because they were leaving Egypt and they wanted a new God just for them. And it was... You got to understand, it was a racial thing, but it wasn't like, well, the Arameans are part of our race, so they're naturally, part of our thing. No! even people that were racially the same as them were foreigners to them and had strange gods to them. It was just for them. It was only for them. Even the, because you look at all the northern territory of Israel, all the way through Syria and into northern Iraq. Well, that's where they came from. They're Aramaeans. When they came out of Egypt, they didn't care about those people. They weren't like, "Oh, you're my brother. We're all together in this new religion." No, they didn't. It was just for them. It was just for the people that came out of Egypt. So here's my point. The Greeks had a creator god. And it wasn't Zeus. It was called, I believe it's pronounced Phanes or Protagonus. Let's say Protagonus because that's easier for me to know I'm saying it correctly. So Protagonus or maybe Phanes or Phanes or something. But let's say Protagonist. So Protagonist was the creator of all the gods. Well, then he's the creator god. So why don't you Muslims start calling, instead of calling it Allah, call it Protagonist, or call it Atom, or call it Ta? You see what I mean? Because you're like, well, it's there's one creator. Okay, good. So then it's Protagonist. Because I'm European. I'm going to call it Protagonist. So I don't need a foreign god. Now, this is like common sense, but it's strange that people think that you have to join their foreign religion. Because let's look at even within Islam, right? You've got Arabs, okay? They're the ones that invented Allah, and the religion of Islam was invented by Arabs for Arabs, but they say it's for everyone, it's for all mankind, and then they said that the Bible corrupted it, and well, no, it was made by Israelites for Israelites, and then you came along and said, well, we're not Israelites, but we want to be part of this thing too, so we're going to just say that all those prophets were really prophesying for all of the humanity. No, they weren't. They just weren't. I mean, that's just not true. So you've got all these different races in that people that follow Islam, like you have a lot of different races that follow Christianity and Catholicism, or vice. So you've got Indonesian people and Malaysian people and Iranian people and Pakistani people and Indian people and Iraqi people and Egyptians and North Africans and Arabs and people in Syria and Lebanon and people in parts of Europe. And it's like they're all worshiping a foreign god. They're all worshiping a foreign god that was given to them by Arabs. Well, why? But see, the thing, if it's just the creator god, well, every race can name their own creator god. That's what the Israelites did. They just called it Yahu or Yahuwah. Or no, I'm sorry, they called it Yahweh. No, I'm sorry. No, the correct pronunciation originally, Yahuwah. I'm sorry, that's correct. The correct pronunciation is Yahuwah. Yahuwah, which is where you get Joshua, where you get Yasus, which is where you get Jesus, where you get Jehovah, Yahuwah, Yahuwah, Jehovah. So it all came from, because that was the name of the tribe that lived in this one territory in southern Canaan area. They were the Yahuwah tribe. So they called God, it was the god of Yahuwah. And then the god became called Yahuwah. That's actually how it happened. The people were called the Yahuwah tribe. There was a Yahuwah tribe, a Reuben tribe, a Semit tribe, an Issachar tribe. Issachar. There were some other tribes. There was a Piasipus tribe. These were called Shasu tribes. Piasipus is where you get Josephus. Piasipus is Josephus, is Joseph. Piasipus is Joseph. So these are Canaanite tribes that adopted the religion of that came out of Israel, or came out of Egypt, but was said to have come originally from Aram, which is in the north, which is where these people came from, that had this ideology that all the gods were not real, and that there was a spiritual dimension that created the universe, and that was the real God. But Abraham, like I said, did not make a religion out of it, and neither did the story of Joseph, and neither did the story of Noah, and neither did the story of Jacob, really. It wasn't like they made it into a codified religion. It was more of a philosophy. So it was the Israelites that made it into a religion, and then that religion was changed by the in the Christian era, and they made it into another form of the religion, and then that was made into another form of the religion by the Muslims, even though they weren't Israelites. That's one of the big things you have to understand too. At least the Christians were Israelites. They were Judeans, they were Israelites. That's who wrote the doctrine. The Muslims were just Arabs that had encountered this religion and said, we don't like it, so we're going to change it and turn it into this other thing. And so, where does all that lead? So here's where it leads. What I'm trying to say is, the Bible says do not worship foreign gods. I've always found it extremely offensive that people think I should worship their foreign god. I already have a creator god in Egypt called Atum or Yepta. I already have a creator god in Greek called Protagonist. Did the Germans have a creator god? They probably did. Did the Hindus have a creator god? I'm sure they already do. I don't know what the creator god's name is in India, but guess what? It's the same God, right? Well, then why does anyone need to convert to your religion? If it's the same God, then I don't need to convert. So I can worship Atum as the creator. Atum is the creator. Yepta is the creator. Protagonist is the creator. I don't need to convert. The whole thing about Israelites and their God was for them. That's all. Now, I read the Bible, and I love the Bible, and I love the philosophy of the Bible. And I love it because the things that I learn in the Bible don't just apply to the Israelites, they apply to anybody. So to that degree, there is a universality there. Now, in the old days, there was this thing which I call transtheonomesis. 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 Which is the ancient races would know the other race by their gods. And the Greeks would know the people in Iraq by their gods. You know, they said, well, we have Enki. And the Greeks said, okay, well, we're going to call him Prometheus. And, you know, and so, you know, and they said, we have Marduk. And the Greeks are like, oh, and we're going to call him Zeus. And the Romans are going to call him Zeus Pater, Father Zeus, Jupiter. And we've got Saturn, and the Greeks have got Kronos. And you see what I mean? So it's like all these things that we see and experience and are part of, they're happening to everybody. It's not limited to one group of people. And so a lot of times we begin to covet, you know, the Christians began to covet the God of that was spoken of in the Bible, to the point where they're like, well, we're the real this and that, and everybody does that. I don't, you know, there's a lot of Jewish people that are trying to say that they're the original Israelites. I don't believe that. I don't think that. I mean, it's, the original Israelites, whoever they were, are probably not. You know, they've probably just mixed up with everybody else, and it's just like, it's not really. It doesn't even matter, because it wasn't like this special strain, this special racial strain was created by God, like some of these Christian identity people think, right? You know, no. Atum, the story of Atum, that comes from Atom. I'm sorry, the story of Adam, A-D, Adam, means red because the earth was red by the Red Sea. And it's like the sun because it's freaking hot. So it's red, and he's Adam. And Adam was Atum, and Atum materializes as the sun in Egyptian philosophy. Because what the Israelites did was they took the genealogy of Egypt, beginning with Atum, and they turned it into a story of their people, the race called the Israelites. That's what they did. So it's not a true story. It's not like there really was a guy named Adam and a really guy named Eve. No, it's just a story. And it goes back to Egypt, and it also goes back to Chaldea. And there's not much else I want to say about this at this point, because I don't want to make this video too long. But anyway, this idea of worshiping other gods, you don't need to worship other gods. I love to read about all these different philosophies. The true God is the divinity that's within you. And this is your connection to the creator of the universe. So that's where you want to look. And that's what the Bible, frankly, teaches. I made another video about that just earlier called Immortality is Unconditional. and I made some others. But it says in the Bible that God creates man and he puts life into him. Well, that life, that soul that's in you, is God. Your soul is God. It comes from God, it returns to God. Ecclesiastes 12:7. Body to earth, soul to God. Okay, that's the end of the video.